Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Let's Chat Reality. I'm Michael,
And I'm Molly.
and today we have two finales to cover, the Survivor 47 finale and the Ultimatum Season 3 finale and reunion. So, shows are ending here as we get towards the holiday season, and we are going to be covering both of these shows. But let's go ahead and start with Survivor. Why don't we, Molly?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, so to start this episode, it was kind of part two of the finale, if you will, since they added an episode this season and split them in two. We normally would start with five going into the finale, but this season we just started with four. So we went straight to the immunity challenge and see that Rachel wins yet again, securing her place in the final three and tying the female record for immunity wins in a single season. So that was really cool to see. I love that Rachel set the record here, tied the record here with her last chance, her last opportunity to do that, and she did it, which really, to me, cements her before we even knew, if she was going to win, what was going to happen at the end. To me, this moment cemented her as a Hall of Famer on Survivor. This is someone, this is something that's going to be in the record books when you look back at Survivor.
Yeah, agreed. Also, that challenge was close. Like, I was actually getting really nervous that Rachel wasn't going to win that. And I was rooting for her. So I really wanted her to win. So I felt like it was an exciting one to watch. Like, I couldn't take my eyes off of the screen. I was just peeled and wanting to see what was going to happen. And luckily, Rachel came out with that win.
No, I was too. I mean, Sam was in the lead for quite a while there, and I was just like, "Oh God!" Like, I still had hope. Like, we know that she's good at fire, so I was like, "Okay, if she doesn't win this, she still has another opportunity. It's not like they can just immediately vote her out." This is one of the the rare times where I was like, "Oh my God, thank God we have the fire making challenge," which I don't say that very often, but in this moment where I was like, "Okay, this is going to be like Rachel's last opportunity," but she didn't need it. She ended up winning, coming from behind. And we come back from the challenge, go back to camp, and Rachel tells Teeny and Sam that she's planning on bringing Sue to the final three. Sue's been her loyal ally throughout this game, and that she was going to put both of them into fire and let them duke it out. So I wasn't surprised by this. Kind of figured this was going to happen. I think I predicted last week on the pod. I think I was kind of saying like what I thought the chain of events was going to be here at at the finale, and this was kind of what I expected. Like if Rachel wins immunity, she's going to bring Sue with her. It just makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. I felt like there wasn't any other option there, to be honest. Like, she and Sue were closest, and Teeny and Sam were both trying to get out Rachel. Sue would never try to get out Rachel, so at that point, just it made the most sense. Also, Sue wasn't gonna be a strong competitor to Rachel, so another reason why Rachel would bring Sue there.
Yeah, in every sense, it just makes sense. And people say, "Oh, should you put yourself into making fire if you win immunity? Like, is this your opportunity to show the jury that you earn it?" End with this, amazing moment of winning fire. And season 43 was the one kind of weird exception where that seemingly played a huge factor in why Cassidy lost. And I think ever since then, I'm even less worried about it if I'm a player because I think that pretty much they cast mostly superfans these days, and superfans know how poorly received that was on season 43. And I think that if anything, that happening and being so like those players being so hated for doing making that such a big deal, I think makes me feel like as a player, oh, that's not something that I need to worry about. And it's stupid. They shouldn't worry about it. That should never have been a thing. And so I think there's no world in which I think Rachel should have done it. And I'm not surprised that she didn't either.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we end up with an epic fire making challenge, I would say. I mean, Teeny was in the lead. We saw them practicing before we get there. And Rachel was helping Teeny, showing her how to do it. Rachel's famously, people have said that she's great at making fire. So she was helping Teeny so that they could beat Sam. And Sam, at first, kind of was acting a little cocky with it, to Teeny, kind of making Teeny feel like, oh, he's going to be so good at it. And then we see Sam really struggling and learn that he did not practice this before coming on Survivor for whatever reason. I think it was a little bit of arrogance, maybe thinking that this wouldn't be an issue, that, oh, he'd just win immunity and wouldn't have to worry about this. And turns out he did, and that was a mistake. And we see him really struggle with it, kind of reading his note from home back and, letting that kind of encourage him to keep trying. And then we get to the fire making challenge and see that Teeny was at first had a huge lead. That it was, I mean, it seemingly was just like hovering over that rope for minutes. Just nothing was happening. And then Sam, they gave Sam enough time to come back and he ends up pulling it out from behind. So, but that was that my heart was being like, I didn't even really care that much who won, but I just found myself like, oh my God, I this is crazy.
I know. I was so shocked. I even took a reaction video because I was like, wait, like when Sam started getting close, I was like, there's no way that he actually is going to win this now. And then he did. And it was just crazy. I felt so bad for Teeny in that moment because their fire was doing so well, but it just was going to the side. And so it wasn't able to hit the rope in the right spots where it had to. And it was just like the contrast of where Teeny's fire was from when Sam it wasn't even like close, like in the beginning parts of it, like how Sam was able to come back from that was just wild. Like I actually want to go watch that fire again. I was so impressed. Like I
Oh,
was
I
like,
have.
what is happening?
Yeah. Yeah, I saw so many people online saying like, "Oh, Genevieve is over there with a huge fan, like pushing the wind away from Teeny, and it's her one last chance to just like manipulate Teeny." And people were having fun with it, but it was, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt terrible for Teeny. Like, what a way to go out where it's just like, oh my god, like totally out of your control. Like, you did
Mhm.
everything they could to do that, and it was just a matter of which station you were at and which way the wind was blowing. And it's just like, I mean, that's why this fire making is such a stupid thing, like to be required. Like, it's one thing to do in a tiebreaker. Like, I get that you have to break a tie in some way. And I think that that's an interesting way to do it. But to force that on the players, and I don't know, it's just, I don't love it. And to me, this example, while it was fascinating to watch, the actual fairness of it really felt a little shaky in this moment, and not like the producers were intentionally doing anything, but just like the fact that it's, your whole game, you could play a perfect game basically, lose the final immunity challenge and lose because of the way the wind was blowing.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Couldn't say it better myself.
Well, we do see, as we said, that Teeny lost, and so we end up with our final three of Sam, Sue, and Rachel. Now, this was kind of an interesting montage that we get when they go back to camp, where we saw kind of like they used to call this a fallen comrade section. I don't know if you remember this, Molly, but like in the early days of Survivor, they used to do a whole thing where they would walk around camp, and every single eliminated player, they would have like a little station where the final three or final, was this at the final three, or yeah, this was at the final three back in the day, even though when they had a final two. Um, the final three would go around and say something about every player. And it was always kind of this funny thing because there would be the pre-merge players that would like the final three, some of the time, like none of them knew them, or like maybe one of them was on a tribe with them at some point, or like was there for 2 days, and it's just like they had nothing to say about this person, and it was always kind of this funny thing. But like this used to be a long section of the finales where they would do this and go through every player, and then they ended up cutting it entirely. And now it feels like they're kind of slowly like bringing in like a condensed version of it in this season, which I thought was kind of interesting. And it was just obviously limited to the jury, but I kind of liked it. It felt a little old school to me. Like you kind of had them, the final three, talking about the jurors, and then the juror talk about the final three, or at least one of the final three. And so I kind of liked this section. I thought it was a good use of the time before they actually get to tribal.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was interesting just hearing. I mean, obviously, we know about each player's game in general, but like hearing them speak to it and sharing different highlights that maybe I had forgotten some things that had happened or overall qualities about them, just setting up for that final tribal just felt good.
Yeah, I agree. Well, then we get to the final tribal, and we start with each juror obviously ask a question, or I guess like we didn't really get like Genevieve asking a question. I don't think she just kind of or Teeny even like I feel like they just kind of like tagged on to someone else's question, but most of the jurors got to actually ask a question, and maybe those two had one we didn't see cut for time. But we start with Gabe, and he asks how each of their games will be remembered. Not what they want, but how they think it will be remembered. So we start with Rachel, said that she went from being an underdog to a threat, but doesn't care how she's remembered, really. And while Sam says he does care how he's remembered, and he wants to be remembered as scrappy, using charm and humor. And then we get what Sue thought was a big reveal, I guess is the way I'll put it. Sue reveals that she's actually 59 years old and would be the oldest female winner if she were to win. It seemed like Sam was the only one really surprised by this. Everyone else was just kind of like smiling and didn't seem to have a huge reaction. But I think Sue thought this was going to be like her big moment.
Yeah. No, that was funny. I felt like she obviously like underplayed it, saying that she was in her 40s, but I think most people on the tribe could tell that she was older than that. And so when she revealed that, it just became like a okay, like sure, like yes, it's still cool that you got there, but your game itself didn't provide its like winning material, but like it is still great that she made it to the final three.
Oh yeah, I mean it's very impressive. I think like anytime someone like that who's such an outlier in the cast in terms of age or in whatever sense, I think it's always incredibly impressive because they had to overcome an extra obstacle that most others did not. And so I think for Sue to still be there and having won an immunity, having like she did play the game, and she wasn't just carried along. And while she spoiler alert, doesn't get any votes here, I think that she's not just your kind of typical final three goat. Like I think that she did have some arguments for why she should win.
Yeah. Definitely, and I feel like Rachel's answer here, I felt like she could have been a little bit stronger in this response just because she's had such a great game. Like everyone loves her and how strong she was as a player. And I feel like in this moment, I mean, she definitely, I think, got more confident as the answers went on. But here I felt like she was still kind of retracting a little bit and like showcasing her real potential. But obviously the jury ended up seeing that she was the best player. But in that question, I was like nervous. I was like, wait, but I kind of like Sam's answer better. Like,
I felt the same way, and I don't know that I loved Rachel saying that she doesn't care how she'll be remembered. I felt that I understood what she was saying, like that that's not why she's playing. She's not playing to, be somebody's favorite player the next season. She's playing to play the best game that she can. And I understood where she was going with that, but it almost felt a little bit dismissive to me, like, oh, I don't care about your question. Like your question's dumb. Like I don't care how I'm remembered. Like that there was a little bit of that to me, just the way that she kind of worded that at the end, that made me feel like, I kind of, yeah, I agree with you. Like I liked Sam's answer a little bit better. So I did start to get a little bit worried. Like this was like this beginning of my slight worry
me too.
during this whole final tribal.
Yeah,
But then we get to Caroline's question, and she asks what each of their biggest mistakes were in the game. And I actually liked this question. I feel like this isn't a common question that we get, and I kind of like the fact that it's maybe something where they have to figure out a way to say this, but also end up making it a positive for them. So I kind of thought that was an interesting question. But Rachel said that she was blindsided by the Sierra vote and had to shift her game after that. That she wasn't fully in the know during the pre-jury, and then that was the moment, that Sierra vote, where she kind of really had to completely change her game. Sam's mistake was not tying up loose ends and kind of leaving people out of things and making them not trust him. Specifically, I would say Andy was an example of that. And then Sue's mistake was trusting Andy for a third time after he blindsided Caroline. So, what did you think of those answers to that question?
Yeah, I think that was smart for all their answers to that. With Rachel's response, like obviously that was a big shift in the game when everyone voted against Sierra, and then Rachel and Sam were left out of that. So Rachel knowing that she really needed to build up more of those connections and get more trust with people obviously got her to the end because that did help her with her changing in alliances basically. Um, and same with Sam, I feel like because his mistake was just kind of just not tying up those loose ends, like, that didn't make sense there too. And Sue's, that was so funny. I actually didn't know what Sue was gonna say, and so when she said that, like, she didn't even, like, give explanation, maybe they cut it out, but, like, it was just everyone just was like, "Okay, yeah, you got on my biggest ally here, and I trusted you for not" like, he did or she didn't want to trust him, but obviously she did in that moment, and then by doing that, like, it blindsided her, so, she was upset by that.
Yeah, it was just like Andy catching strays there.
Yeah.
I loved that moment. But then we get to Saul, and Saul asks Rachel what is one thing about her game that would surprise him. Kind of getting at the fact that sometimes these players watch back the episodes and then they're like, oh my God, I had no idea that this person played such a hard game. And if I had known that out on the island, then, my vote might have been different, or I would have, played this completely differently. And so this was a moment for Rachel to kind of get ahead of that and hopefully, explain something that might not be obvious to the jury about her game. So that to me, like that was all gifting Rachel this opportunity, and I liked that because then I was like, okay, Rachel's getting the attention here a little bit. Like maybe this is them trying to help out Rachel because maybe the first couple of answers weren't quite as overwhelmingly positive to Rachel's game as they'd hoped, and Sam was getting in a little bit more of an argument than maybe we expected here. But Rachel answers that by saying that she talked about the vote where she played her idol and basically got everybody to sell her game for her, and thinking that she was going home, and they were all kind of eulogizing her, and then she pulls out this idol that they weren't expecting, and she ends up staying in the game after having all the players talk about what an amazing player she is. So I thought that was a great moment. The fact that she said that kind of she was able to do that and still stay in the game required a lot of back end work on her behalf, and yeah, I thought that was a good answer.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like everyone was shocked to see her idol play, and the jury could see that as well, like, when she actually brought it out, so that solidified to them also, like, how strong she had to be to, like, not mention any of that back at camp and, like, how everyone really did think that she was going home, so that was great to see.
Yeah, this was the moment where I thought that she could have used where she used her shot in the dark in such
Yeah.
a strategic way. And saw this in an exit interview where somebody asked her, like, why didn't she bring that up at all during the final three, during the jury questioning? And she said basically, like, that was such an in the moment thing that it wasn't this idea that she had hatched back at camp and played out. Like, it was such a just like she did it in that moment, and she didn't really think of that because of that. She didn't think of that moment at all. Like that was never something that she even considered bringing up as a positive of her game. And she was like, when I watched it back, yeah, I should have done that. That would have been a great moment that to bring up. But it just wasn't something that she thought about because it was so in the moment, and that wasn't ever something that she considered. But I think this moment, that would have been a great time to talk about that. And I think that may have even been a better answer, or bring up both.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I saw that as well online. I did miss her talking about it too. I was like, well, like that was such a cool moment that she could have brought up. But obviously, like you can't always think about everything in the game. Like when you're playing it, like maybe like you said, like she didn't think it was that big of a deal, or like it was more of like in the moment thing that happened. And wasn't seen as like, oh, that was so big. So she just didn't see it as something to come up in with Final Tribal.
Right. Well, then Andy asks Rachel what makes her game different from winners like Mike Holloway and Ben Driegerman. Because they're not considered the best winners by most Survivor fans. And I thought this was such an interesting question because this is something that only a cast of super fans could have this discussion. Because for those who don't know, basically both of those winners were very challenge and advantage heavy in their wins. And a lot of fans, I'm somebody who thinks that every winner deserves it because they were able to make their game appeal to that specific jury that awarded them the win, that there are no undeserving winners. But typically, if you have a winner's ranking, those two are towards the bottom because of that. And Rachel played a game where she did have a lot of advantages, a lot of challenge wins. And this was Andy's way of basically saying to Rachel, "Hey, how is your game different from those two? Like, why is your game worthy of a win when you would probably say that those two might not have been worthy of their wins?" And so she basically discusses that she early in the game wasn't able to control the game like she had hoped, and so she kind of had to adjust and play a different way than she had originally intended, but that her game wasn't fully just luck and advantages and idols. It was a lot of social game, a lot of strategic game that went along with that, and using everything correctly and having the relationships in order to so that she can use those and still, have people on her side and still be able to stay in the game when she isn't able to use those advantages or was able to wait to use them till the right time because she doesn't have to at the wrong time, earlier on. So I thought she did a pretty good job of describing that. Although I think Sam, because she was started it by saying that she wasn't able to control the game like she had hoped, Sam was able to really swoop in there and say, that's it's kind of turned that to be a negative of her game. So maybe that wasn't the best way to word it, but I think overall she kind of got the point across that she was trying to make.
Yeah, I agree. And it was interesting. Like Sam did have like pretty fair rebuttals. I felt like during Tribal that like that's another point when I was getting nervous. I was like, oh no, like his points here like are coming up and delivering, and I don't know how the jury is receiving this, but I really saw Rachel as like obviously like the winner and most everyone did. But like I feel like in that moment, like I was happy that that question was directed towards Rachel because then you could tell like that the jury was like looking at Rachel as that strongest competitor there.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. I think that Sam killed this final tribal. Like I don't know that he could have done any better at this final tribal. And even though the vote ends up not being super close, I don't know that there's much. Like, I just feel like most jurors know what they're going to do going into it. And there's really not much that these final three can say to change their minds. Like, you might, maybe one or two of them can be swayed, maybe if some disastrous performance could change people's votes. But I think for the most part, people are pretty set. And I think that Sam did as well as he could to change that in people. And yeah, I mean, I think every moment that he, kind of had a rebuttal to something that Rachel said, or yeah, he did great. Like he made this a lot closer in terms of, I think, just viewers' minds than I think any of us were expecting.
Yeah.
So the last question here was from Sierra. Sierra asked Rachel and Sam what they did to overcome the lows that they experienced in the game. And Sam basically said that he thought about not letting his kid self, who was a big Survivor fan, not letting him down. Rachel channeled her husband, Eric. It was just kind of a nice way to end it, giving people a chance to kind of talk about some of the more emotional stuff. But I don't think anything that kind of swayed anyone either way.
Yeah, and we were hearing a lot about that, with Sam and his kid self and just that motivation for his family with the letters from home, motivating him with the fire, so I felt like that story, like, was continuing through that episode, and so it did paint a better picture, I feel like, in Sam's, like, overall, like, esque, like, it wasn't just seen as, like, this, like, guy jock that, like, everyone was trying to get out because, like, he just had it easy, like, he was trying to, like, tug at the strings a little bit more, I felt like, so,
Mhm.
um, I think he did a good job at that, but obviously Rachel had the stronger game, so the emotional side of it wasn't gonna come out and win for him.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel like all season we've kind of I've been seeing so much like who's getting a winners at it. And I think the general consensus was for the last few weeks at least that it was Rachel, but I also was seeing a lot of people saying, well, we know so much about Rachel's game, but we don't know a ton about Rachel as a person. They haven't showed us a ton of her talking about her family back home or this kind of more personal story to endear us to her in that way, whereas Sam was getting a lot of that. And so people were saying, well, we kind of have both sides of that where like most winners, you kind of get a good overall sense of both. And in this game, we had Rachel a lot more with strategic and Sam a lot more with personal. And I think that's why when it was came down between those two, there was a little bit of doubt because they both had certain aspects of what you would consider a typical winners at it. So I wouldn't have been like shocked, I guess you could say, if by the end it ended up being Sam. But we then get to the vote. It does end up being Rachel win 7-1. Kyle was the only one who voted for Sam, which put Sam in second place over Sue, who I feel like didn't get a ton of talking time at this final tribal. I think it was pretty obvious that she was probably not going to be getting any votes here. Maybe there was a thought like maybe one from Caroline, but even that I was not surprised that she didn't vote for Sue. But yeah, I think that this was totally fair, deserved win for Rachel.
Yes, yeah, I was so excited once they started reading the name or reading the votes and all of them are Rachel, I was like, "Yes, this is what I wanted," so I was very happy.
Yeah, a great winner. I think that if I were to think of like winner rankings here, I would absolutely put Rachel in my top 10 and probably a little further up than that. I don't know. I think it's a little bit too soon. Like, I don't want to kind of think like recency bias here too much,
Mhm.
but I think an overall fantastic winner.
Yes, agreed.
All right. Well, then we get the after show real quick. Not too much exciting happened. Kyle's asked why he voted for Sam. Said kind of just that Sam meant a lot to him personally. I feel like we didn't get a ton of their relationship on the island, but I guess it seemed like, from what I can remember at least, but it seemed like they were very close and that he meant impacted his life in a very positive way and just means a lot to him. So it seemed like it was more of a personal vote than really thinking that Sam was going to win. But also, I could see it being a little bit of spite against Sue, maybe that she wanted to make sure that Sam got second. I don't know.
Yeah, I actually just saw a video on TikTok today that Kyle was saying that he knew that Rachel was gonna take away the votes, and he didn't feel like Sam deserved to get 0 votes in the final, that he was, like, deserved that 2nd place, like what you just said, like, it seemed not because of Stu maybe, but, like, just in general, like, for his game,
Hmm.
that he deserved to at least get 1 vote, so he wanted to provide that for Sam.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's not we've seen that a couple times in the past before that somebody wanted to kind of whether it was spite against the other person or just kind of for the person they were voting for wanted to make sure that it wasn't a tie or that they were a zero vote finalist. So that's not unheard of, but yeah, I am so curious what really happened there between Sue and Kyle and like how Rome got thrown in there or what he was saying in his exit interview. If there's, I just, yeah, I feel like at some point, maybe when contracts expire, we'll get more details on all of that. And by that point, I will have completely forgotten about it. But we'll see if we get any more with that. But yeah, that makes sense. And then Sue talks, or Jeff tells Sue that she's one of only 5 women over 50 to make it to the finals on Survivor. So that was really cool.
Yeah. No, I know, that's impressive, that is crazy.
Yeah. And then, just kind of talk about the season, but nothing super new or exciting. But it was a short little after show. I still wish that they would wait one more night, like give the final three just one night to sleep in a normal bed, get fed, put makeup on, like get normal, nice clothes, and then do the after show. Like they don't. I'm not asking them to go back to live. I know that's probably a lot more costly um, and is a lot harder to pull off, but logistically. But I just ask that they wait one more night.
Yeah, I think that would be the best for their own mental states. I feel like at that moment they're just like exhausted, especially right after giving all their answers and talking about their games, that a night of sleep would definitely be beneficial.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that we're ever going to get that, but I really hope at least for Survivor 50 they do something special, like whether it's a live reunion or just something more than this little after show. So we'll see about that. But we do get the preview for Survivor 48. Get to see a lot of the castaways and their little blurbs. Did any of them stand out to you that you remember?
I can't really remember anyone in particular, and I need to rewatch that because I haven't rewatched it since last week, so
Yeah.
I can't think of anyone right now, but I remember it being good preview. I was like, "Wow, like, this looks pretty good."
I would say like the two that I remember standing out to me were the guy who talked about chocolate milk, that he drinks a lot of chocolate milk, and that's how he got his muscles. So I was like, okay, I like chocolate milk. And then there was one girl was saying how she's neurodivergent and or on the
Mhm.
oh god, I hope that I'm not getting it wrong. Was it neurodivergent or on the autism spectrum? Maybe I don't remember what the wording that she said, but I thought that was really cool, and hopefully, we'll hear more about that as being part of her story. So I loved seeing that representation. That's not something that we see often on Survivor, so that was really cool. And yeah, I mean, nobody that like last season when we got the 47 promo was exciting because we saw Asia and from RJB, and we saw John Lovett. So there was kind of some familiar faces in that promo that I think got people really hyped. And this one, I don't know that I didn't recognize anyone at least, and haven't heard people talking about that they recognize people. But hopefully, it's another great season.
Yeah, I know, I'm sad that season 47 is now over because this was a great season, but hopefully it keeps going up from here and 48 is just as good or not if not better.
Yeah, this was a very special season to me for many reasons, I feel like. So this is one that I will remember for a very, very long time. But I'm hopeful. I feel like we've had a string of, I would say, four very strong seasons in a row from 44 to
Mhm.
47. So I hope we can continue this because I think we're on a good path here.
Yes, agreed. Well, shifting gears here a bit, shall we get into the Ultimatum reunion?
Yes, let's do it.
So let's just go through each of the couples in the order that we hear them talking about their updates and everything. So, first up, we have Mariah and Caleb. So, they get engaged in that final episode and they are still engaged. And they're talking about future plans, about having a destination wedding in summer 2026, and overall seeming to be happy. They obviously had to work through some things, like had some issues come up, like, while they were like, since seeing the show also, especially with because of Arya and Caleb's trial marriage, so they discussed that and that Caleb wasn't totally honest in saying that he had that emotional connection with Arya, and so then Mariah was definitely hurt by that, and it seemed like that was kind of bringing up some wounds still when they were talking about that in that hot seat there, which I felt bad for her. But Arya was calling them fake and saying that Caleb wasn't telling her the truth about their emotional connection, which, like, obviously, yeah, like that part of it, like, isn't great for Mariah to hear. And the Instagram part of the story also was interesting. I was like, what is going on here? But they were following each other on Instagram, but then Caleb said, or then Arya said that he blocked her and he was apparently liking some of Arya's stories after filming. So I don't really know what to believe in this story, but I still think that Mariah and Caleb are a strong couple and that they will get married regardless of what happened with Arya. Like that was from the past, and I think that they'll move forward from that.
Yeah, to me, it seemed like their relationship was in a good place, but that maybe they had hit a little bit of a bump when they were watching the show, that there were maybe some things that Mariah wasn't fully aware of between Caleb and Arya that maybe upset her, or that just Caleb and Arya's continued social media, like I wouldn't say like relationship, but just like I guess viewing and liking stories. And I don't even know, like, did she say that he was liking her stories or that he was viewing her stories?
She said viewing and like,
Oh, okay. Because I was like, viewing, I was like, okay, is
or
she
maybe I
actually?
think she said like, I'm pretty sure. I know for a fact viewing.
Yeah, no, because I remember you were saying viewing, because I remember thinking to myself, like, was she looking for to see if he was viewing them, or like did he just kind of happen to come up on the top and she saw like, oh, okay, like I don't know. That to me was like, is she still maybe have some feelings there too, or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how many views she gets on her stories, but she would probably have to sift through quite a bit, if
Yeah.
he wasn't towards the top already, which I would assume he probably would be towards the top because she was probably like already like having maybe someone verified or someone you talk to more regularly or like maybe just in
Oh
general. She'd
yeah.
been looking at his page, like those people come up closer to the top, but I still like she is still looking. Like I think that's still like you maybe don't need to care that much about that at that point. Like if you haven't been talking, like if they hadn't been in any contact, like then a story view, like maybe it does like question some things because maybe he wasn't viewing them before, which is what she mentioned, which also means she was paying attention who was viewing her stories before.
Because you can
Uh,
only see that for 24 hours. You can't go
yeah,
back later and like go back and say, "Oh, how long has he been viewing them for?" Like that goes away. So like she had to have constantly been keeping track of that.
yeah. So definitely some feelings I feel like that were there. Or maybe she was
Yeah.
just trying to find a crack there. I don't know. But I mean, I obviously look at my views on my
Well, I
stories.
do too, but I get like 150. I don't get probably like I'm sure she gets hundreds, if not thousands. Like so, I feel like that's a little bit different. Like that's a
Yeah,
lot of work.
you can skim through that pretty quickly. I don't know. I would still do
I don't
that. I
think you
think.
can search. So, like, if you're getting like let's say you're getting 1,000 views, that's a lot to go through to look for one specific name. I don't know. That to me is that's more effort than it's worth.
Yeah, for sure, and it's not like she even got anything out of it because Caleb and Mariah are still together. But it is interesting, like knowing like that we saw all that would happen like in the show that Caleb wasn't totally being honest about. That Mariah was then finding that out. Like wasn't great. Like I think Caleb should have been more honest, like how Scotty and Arya were, or like how Arya was with Scotty when things happened, like right when they got back. But overall, it seemed to be working out for them. So happy for them.
Yeah, no, I think that as long as they can get through this, like I would say if they can get through the next like 2 months, I'm pretty confident that they'll last. Like, it feels like this is just a little bit of a bump, and once the hype from the show dies down, once, like, they can kinda move on from it, I have confidence that they will go through with this marriage and have a happy, long life together. So, I think they're the one couple that, you know, actually seemed healthy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, next up we have Arya and Scotty, and they actually did get engaged in the finale, but are no longer engaged. And Arya said that things were just moving way too fast, and she actually called it off the next day after the proposal. So she said she acted out of emotion and realized that she made the wrong move there in saying yes. And they even though they broke off the engagement, they still tried to stay together and work through things and ended up moving in together, and then that didn't work out either. So it was kind of a roller coaster there for
Yeah.
them. And even like Arya was also experiencing some really heartbreaking things with her grandmother passing away, and also she suffered a miscarriage. So really was going through it in the last year. And I'm just happy that she's no longer with Scotty now. And hopefully she can find someone that she does feel supported by and doesn't have the arguments that they were having, and overall just the love that she deserves to have.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that from the very first episode, we could see that their relationship was not super healthy. From Arya getting upset when Scotty was talking to Zaina, and just him trying to kind of. I mean, we talked about this weeks ago, but like him just trying to kind of downplay it, gaslight her a bit. It seemed like, and I think that that was in the very first episode, and we've seen kind of little moments similar to that with Scotty ever since throughout the season. And so when they did get engaged at the finale, I was like, okay, like hope for the best, I guess. But then we obviously, 30 minutes later, I'm watching them together, and then we find out that, okay, they're not together anymore. But yeah, I wasn't surprised to find out that didn't last. And I think you could kind of tell a little bit even during the engagement that Arya was just kind of like in the moment, didn't want to upset him by saying no, didn't want to embarrass him like that. And I think that this was kind of doomed, but I'm glad that very quickly they ended it and it didn't get to a marriage and then a divorce.
Yeah. No, as soon as she said yes, I was like, "Oh, there's no way that that's lasting," because of how that conversation went. Like in the beginning, she was crying and being like, "Oh, like I'm so nervous and anxious." Like it seemed like she was gonna say no. Like I was like,
Yeah.
"What? What did he say?" But obviously, like we heard that back. Like she was like, "Well, he was saying everything that I wanted him to say, and like I didn't expect him to," and all of that. Um, but she should have stuck to her gut, which obviously then the next day she was like, "Yeah, never mind." Um, but yeah, so that was some crazy stuff, but we'll have to see what happens for both of them because obviously they were not meant to be together.
Yeah.
Next up, another couple not meant to be together, Zaina and JR. So there was some crazy stuff going on in the reunion here with them. But overall, first up, they did not get engaged. In the finale, it actually almost seemed like they were going to. Like, I was kind of nervous. I was like, wait, like, why are they seeming like they might get engaged now?
Yeah.
But I didn't want them to. And I'm glad they did not. And they
They
went
didn't want to either.
yeah, they didn't want to, but then it kinda seemed like they weren't gonna totally stop talking, which is what happened, like, they moved out from their place they had together, they got separate places, but they were right across the street from each other, so still in each other's lives. She still spent the birthday with JR, which happened right after filming, and they had the holidays together and then they went on a break. So then this break was just kind of confusing for Zaina, especially. She was upset because she wanted to clarify if they were seeing other people and didn't know totally because he wasn't sure or she wasn't sure what he was saying about it. And he called her manipulative because she didn't want him talking to other girls, but she didn't have that clarification if they were talking to anyone else. And then so it was just like that was kind of like a I didn't even know what was going on there. Like, were they on a break? Like, were they not? Like, I don't know what they were even saying in that part of the episode.
Yeah, I mean, this was like Ross and Rachel. Are we on a
Yeah,
break? Like, yeah. I mean, kind of what I got out of it was basically that Zaina didn't want them to see other people, and Jr. did,
yeah,
and basically that was kind of they just had two different definitions of what a break is, and Jr. thought that Zaina was being manipulative by saying that he shouldn't see other people, but that she didn't want to be with him, and that that was confusing for him, and she was basically saying that that if he goes off and hooks up with all these other girls, then like this is a breakup, not a break. So I feel like they just kind of had very two different ideas of what was supposed to happen here during that time, and they just kind of were clashing and couldn't come to an agreement on kind of what how to define them.
Yeah, for sure. And then Zayn also brings up the fact that she actually got some DMs the day before filming the show, the whole when they started filming for the Ultimatum, from a girl with screenshots of flirtatious messages between her and JR. And so they were kind of already in that rocky space, and Zayn was thinking about breaking up with him, but then they didn't. I went into the show obviously not in the best place. And so that obviously like was gonna be hurtful for Zaina, but glad that out at the end of it, like she remained single and knew her worth in that. But then they also bring up JR and Sandy's relationship and their trial marriage and how Zaina thought that they could have hooked up, but then they say Sandy and JR both say they did not. They kissed 3 times, and that Nick's apartment was also right below them. So Nick was not so happy about that being right underneath of them, because he realized like he was like out on his balcony and looked up and they were filming. So messy for the producers for doing that, honestly.
Oh my god. I mean, that's so wild. Like, I have this hard time with Nick because there's times where I'm like, okay, he is like obviously did not handle any of this well. He was drinking way too much, aggressive, angry, like did not handle this well. But he was put in a really crappy position. Like having to like probably hear certain like once he knew who was above him, that like every little noise that he heard, he was probably overthinking what that was. Like, are they having sex? Are they like whatever? Like I just can't even imagine having to like, especially when he was alone. Like he didn't even have anyone to like distract him. And so like that to me, like I really felt for him, but he obviously needed to handle everything way differently than he did. But
Yeah.
I can understand why he would go a little crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And then Zaina is also upset with Sandy for then not reassuring or for keep on telling her like during the girls' night that she was saying that nothing was happening and nothing was going on between her and JR when in reality that they were kissing and they had a strong connection there. So Sandy was just saying false information basically to appease to Zaina, even though like in that moment, like I guess Sandy didn't think in the how strong or, like, how it was gonna come off in the editing. Maybe she wasn't thinking that, but Zaina was upset that that came off that way from Sandy's perspective. And yeah, what were your thoughts on that?
No, yeah, like I think that I agree with Zaina completely. I think that Sandy was absolutely downplaying what was happening between her and JR, and for her to like she didn't even ask for that reassurance. Like for her to just voluntarily give that up when it's not really true or it's at least at best misleading was a really crappy thing to do because I think like especially when you get some, like reassurance like that that you're not asking for, you would just assume that that's genuine because there's no reason otherwise for them to say it. And so like that to me is like why? Like that I feel like that was just something that she had in her mind like okay, if I'm asked, this is my answer. This is how I'm going to word this. And like she thought about it so much probably that even like she just kind of blurted it out when it wasn't even like asked. So I don't know. That to me was really crappy of her.
Yeah, agreed. And obviously didn't help Zaina and how she was feeling about it then later on and being like, well,
Yeah.
guess she was just lying to me. But also, I love this moment was when Zaina pulls out her QR code on her nail, brings out Vanessa's phone, I guess. I don't know whose phone it was, and shows proof of the text messages showing that Arya was the one who had said the guys are treating this like a hall pass and insinuating that she was talking about JR because originally JR was accusing Scotty of saying that he was just there for the hall pass, but Xana had messages to prove that. So that was great. Love seeing those receipts.
Oh
What
my
were your
god. The receipts are getting more and more high tech. Like just when you think you've seen every type of receipt on a reunion, for Zaina to get the QR code on her nail and like Amazing,
Yeah.
incredible, groundbreaking, iconic. I've never seen anything like it. Bravo. I mean, like, that was a moment. I love that.
Yeah. No, that was a great moment. I love now everyone's gonna have to take their QR codes onto their nails now in the future for reunions, apparently.
I mean, like, you see people, like, on Bravo, like, bringing these, like, giant poster boards and, like, these, like, kits with, like, bags and, like, all this stuff, like, these binders that never get used, and this was just such a great way to kinda sneak it in there, make it easy, but I guess, like, well, I guess, like, on Bravo, it's like, okay, they do have their, like, Andy has his phone. Like, they could have done that because 'cause I'm trying to think, like, I feel like no phones are allowed, but that's not really true. Like, I think they do. They just have to have them on silent. So, yeah, I think that that could work on any reunion.
Yeah, so Zaina, maybe she started a trend here. And then that was the segue then into us seeing some unseen clips of JR jokingly saying, in a sense, I guess, but not joking, about him using this as a hall pass or like a one night stand and having their like no cameras for certain parts or stuff that he could get away with. So obviously this reunion didn't really put JR in a great light and showing
No.
all those negatives there. But
Yeah,
overall,
I was kind of shocked that I mean, I was really glad that they showed this because I feel like we didn't see this side of him in the beginning of the season. Like, I don't think we had seen any of these clips before, and so this really, like, I mean, I didn't have the greatest impression of JR before this, but like those clips to me were like, oh, you are not here for quote unquote the right reasons, as we might say on The Bachelor. Like, you are here for to get on Perfect Match, to get on whatever other show you might want to do after this, and just, I mean, that was, yeah, that did not put him in a good light.
no. But it seemed like then Xana's trying to be nice to him at the end, and it's like, oh, like we still have love for each other. But I feel like they just need to not talk to each other and move on because whatever they had was toxic and they should find separate people. And JR said he hadn't dated in the last year, which I think was good because
Yeah,
he
because he
needs
was
time.
trying to get casted on Perfect Match season 3, which he didn't get on, I don't think. Not that I know of.
True. So he had to remain single for his
Yeah.
own clout, basically. But he didn't get on it, but, I mean, I don't know if they're gonna cast it on another show, but hopefully not. Um, but they want the drama, so they
Mm,
probably will.
yeah, I could see them doing it, honestly. I would
Yeah,
say no, but I could see them doing that. I feel like he's exactly, like, the perfect match type.
yeah. But
So,
I'd
I
rather
could
see
add.
Xena.
Oh, me too. I mean, if they're really messy, they could put them both on there. But I could see either one of them. They probably won't do both, but I could see either one. But I feel like if they had to choose one, I kind of feel like they're gonna pick JR.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so we'll see. I love Xana, so I hope for the best for her. And next up, we had Vanessa and Dave come out. So they had left the show during the trial marriages. They left, so I hadn't known if they were together still or anything that was going to go on there. So it was nice to see them come back. Micah and Chanel were also asked to come back, but they did not accept their offer. So we just see Vanessa and Dave come out here on the reunion, and they say that they're still together and that we get some more clarification here from Vanessa about what happened with Nick. Was that like she was just starting to feel like that once they moved in together, there was more going on that we didn't really see that side of it with him drinking a lot and just getting more aggressive. And she felt uncomfortable. And they were having conversations with no cameras around. And she thought that he needed to work on his trauma and that it was just a lot to dump on her, like, very quickly into meeting her, and so that was just a lot, and she wanted to get herself out of that situation, and Nick actually does admit that he acted poorly when he found out about Sandy and JR, so he's admitting to his faults there and saying that he was drinking a lot. So he wasn't trying to hide that, at least. Like, he didn't go back on that, even though, yes, it was bad of how he acted, but he was taking accountability there. And so Vanessa was like, well, there's no opportunity here for relationships, so wanted to leave. And she also felt that Dave, like, he felt that at that moment that it was unnecessary, that like they were both wanting to leave there. So they ended up leaving, and Vanessa didn't even say goodbye to Nick because she was like, well, they barely knew each other, so she didn't think that they deserved that. And they had been fighting all day the day before that she left, so she just wanted to get herself out of that. But so there was a lot that she unpacked there, and I felt like, I mean, it makes a lot more sense now, knowing that, like, we didn't know that entire part of the story of why she wanted to leave, and I'm glad that she got herself out of the situation if she was not feeling safe.
Yeah, no, and I can completely understand why she would want to leave. I would probably want to leave too if I were in her shoes, especially the fact that Nick was drinking so heavily, clearly just mentally not in a good place, and definitely not in the place to be in a relationship. Like, focus on a relationship with her at that point. So I can completely understand why she would want to leave. I just feel like there's still more to the story that we're not getting, because I don't know that I fully understand like why Micah and Chanel also left with him. Why did they have a secret meeting off camera, the two couples together? Why did they just completely abruptly leave, like not even do like a little wrap up for the show? Like, I can understand her not wanting to necessarily say goodbye to Nick, but like do like a little interview, like confessional interview explaining why you're leaving. Like, do something that would kind of at least wrap up your story a bit for the show. And the fact that they didn't do that makes me feel like there was still something where they were upset with the show for putting them in a situation, maybe upset with producers for, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it would be, but I feel like there was some sort of argument with producers that caused them to leave so abruptly in the middle of the night like that, and having to have like a black screen saying that they left.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, maybe there's still some stuff, like, because of their contract, they're not able to share out fully of what happened there, so maybe we'll get some more down the line of the true story in that, but part of it obviously was because of Nick's behavior.
Oh yeah. No, definitely. I can fully see that that is probably at least like 75% of why they left. But I do still
Mhm.
think there's like a chunk that we're missing that would help explain why it happened the way that it did.
Yeah, for sure. And the time of the reunion, they were not engaged, but actually they are engaged now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I actually just saw this on TikTok, and she was showing, like, her nails, like, over the months, like, that video where you're, like, showing, like, she was getting her nails done and waiting for the engagement, so it just happened, I think, a few weeks ago, I don't know the exact timing.
Oh, wow. Well, congrats
Um,
to them.
so, yeah, happy for them, but they were sharing that the experience helped them both grow as people, as a couple, and then they're on the same page about marriage and kids, so it was good for them to, like, have those conversations and understand that they really were aligned in that for their future. So
Mhm.
that's great to see. So I'm happy for them.
Yeah, for sure. Me too.
And now I want to follow Vanessa and Dave so I can stay on track, know what's going on in their lives because I kind of miss them. Like, I wish they were on the season more because they were great people.
I mean, I wish that they were on, just because I feel like the show is best when you have more couples and
Yeah.
you don't have to like, I don't know. I feel like the more couples, the less filler. And I think that, not that there was a ton of filler. Like, I think this was a good season actually. But I think it's always best when you have more options of interesting scenes to choose from.
Yeah. For sure. Well, now we go back to the couples that were in the season for the whole part of the season, Sandy and Nick. So we see that they did not get engaged in that final episode, but it looked like he kind of was going towards the ring in his jacket, and then Sandy was just like, "Oh my gosh," like looking like not happy about it. So then that's when Nick knew, like, okay, this is over. Um, and Nick was also talking about how he was drinking too much and using alcohol to numb himself, and so he decided to get help after the show. And overall, seemed like Nick was not in the greatest place, but now he's gone better and he is dating someone new now. So that's good for him. But for Sandy and JR, they have not seen each other since the show.
Do you believe that?
I don't know. They said they haven't, but I feel like there definitely has been some sort of texting, or maybe like, I mean, Zaina was saying that they said happy holidays or happy new year or whatever. They said had been DMing or something that was going on, but I don't think that there's been anything like serious that would have happened.
Oh, no, I don't know that I don't think that they've seen each other in person,
Yeah.
but I think they've probably sent messages back and forth more than they want to let on. I don't even know why they would lie about it necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like Sandy and Nick are together or JR and Zayn are together. Like, it's not like they're protecting their partner by, downplaying it. But I just can't imagine. I feel like they just had such a strong connection the whole time on the show. And the fact that both of them are not with their partners, like, I just don't know why they wouldn't be in communication with each other necessarily. So,
Yeah, I think they
I
just
I I
both
yeah.
went through that emotional time maybe together and they were like, "Okay, now let's leave that back on the
Yeah,
show."
yeah, maybe. Maybe it kind of puts them back into, like, a bad mental space of how they were while they were there. I don't know, but
Yeah.
it just seems a little surprising to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm honestly surprised how Sandy and Nick lasted so long in their relationship to begin with, because I never felt like she was totally in it and he was kind of just like forcing her to want to be with him, and that's not great. And she knew that in that moment, then at the end, like, yeah, this isn't my person. But I think she knew that longer than that. Like, I think that maybe now she's realized that, like, whoever she dates next, like, she'll be able to tell like signs earlier on, and knowing how who she wants as a partner and who is a better fit for her versus like who she could try to make a good fit. Because you never want to be with someone who you're like, "Oh, there's the potential of we being good us being good together," and all that. Also, I feel like all these couples, like, especially with Sandy and Nick, they're always like, "Oh, we have so much love for each other and, like, I still love you," or, like, all this stuff, and I'm like, "I don't think you should do that, or you should still feel that way." Like, I think, like, obviously you can care about someone, but, like, love them? I don't know.
I never fully understood Sandy and Nick together. To me, it really from the episode 1, it felt like she she was not able to fully be herself with him, and she was a lot more, I guess, opinionated and no, I don't want to say like too strong for him, but I just think that her personality was a little bit stronger than somebody who Nick would want to be with. And I felt like she never fully respected him. Like that she just kind of liked the fact that he would always she always knew that he was gonna come back to her. Like, they could have a fight, they could have a blow up, and then the next day, he would come in and apologize, and they would do that cycle all over again. And she kind of knew that he wasn't going anywhere, and so she could kind of walk all over him, and he would just kinda take it and be okay with it. And I felt like when Sandy then was in a trial marriage with JR, that was somebody who she respected. That was somebody who she felt like she had just this chemistry with that she didn't have with Nick, and just a totally different type of relationship. And I don't even know that you can necessarily compare the two because I feel like it's just such a different relationship on such different levels that Sandy and Nick have the history together and probably maybe a deeper connection, but Sandy and JR just had a more like just sparks
Mhm.
than Sandy and Nick had.
Yeah, for sure. It didn't make sense to me either, but they were dating, so obviously something happened that they wanted to stay together. But it's best for both of them that they're not together anymore.
Yeah.
And hopefully Nick's new relationship is good and healthy and all that he's been looking for. And hopefully Sandy can find someone that she wants to be with and doesn't have to question about knowing if she wants to be with them long term or not.
I gotta say, I
So
can see Sandy on Perfect Match too. I mean, she, I feel like she's so much like Jess from Love Is Blind that I just, and Jess obviously was on Perfect Match, so I could absolutely see Sandy coming on at some point as well.
yeah, I agree. So we'll have to stay tuned for all these updates and seeing if we see them on any other shows in the future on Netflix. But that's a wrap on season 3, and I felt like it was a good season.
I agree. I enjoyed it. It was so much better than season 2.
Mhm.
So, definitely a step in the right direction. I'm sure we're getting Queer Love new season pretty soon, probably early next year. So, excited for that. And yeah, we will keep everyone posted with any more news on season 4.
Yes. Well, thanks so much for listening, everyone, and happy holidays if you're listening to this week of all the holidays happening this week with Christmas, Hanukkah, and New Year's. So much going on in the next week. But we'll also be back next week with talking about our top 10 reality TV shows for the year that Michael and I are not showing each other our list before. So we're going to be reacting to those live. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss that episode next week. And make sure you're following us on Instagram and TikTok at Let's Chat Reality as well for all of our updates there. So thanks so much for listening, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Happy holidays.